Good morning. Monday, January 25th. Um, so we're about 6 months in to this, which we were just taking it a week at a time, but that's pretty cool. And I think it might be good to go back to basics and really foundational technique and, really kind of drive that home, the whole why we started, just simple meditation, the technique, and maybe just review what the purpose of this was. Um, let's start by setting our intention. And for those of you who are new, I'll explain what this is after, why we do this and what it means. You don't have to say it. If you want to say it, you can. This is called the Four Immeasurables Prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Um, so when we started the class, and really look at this like this is like a study group, right? We're all students, and I'm leading a study group rather than me being, teaching meditation of Buddhism or anything like that. We're kind of sharing instruction and sharing teachings and stuff. And when we started, it was really just meditation uh, in a secular way. And interest in Dharma and Buddhism kind of came from your end. And we started, so Meditation 101 was 7 classes, really just meditation techniques, and then people had interest in Dharma, and we started doing talks about that. And 102 kind of incorporates both. But you can totally use the same technique in a completely secular way, devoid of Buddhism or Dharma or whatever. And it works well with Buddhism, and it works well without the practice that we do here and the techniques that we use. So just keep that in mind. Why we set our intentions in the beginning and dedicate at the end. What I've been taught, my practice of Buddhism is 3 parts, really. So there's the setting of the intentions. There's the main section of practice, which can be meditation, which can be many different, there's many different practices in Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism, only one of which is meditation, which we do here. And then at the end, you dedicate the merit gained from the practice to all beings. You set intentions to be a benefit to beings. Now, this sounds like when you're saying, may all beings have happiness, that intention is a very broad, obviously, very broad, very almost seemingly impossible aspiration. Some of us may feel a very unjust aspiration in some ways, that maybe some people don't deserve happiness because they're evil and they're cruel and commit, very harmful acts. But part of the Buddhist teaching in the Four Noble Truths, the talking about suffering and overcoming suffering and the path to liberation or enlightenment, involves the Eightfold Path. One of those is right view. So we're trying to have a much bigger view than we've been habitually conditioned to have over our lifetime and our programming and our, growing up. And some, if you believe in reincarnation as Buddhists do, over many lifetimes, maybe we've seen things from a very limited point of view. That's very much about ourselves, making, ourselves happy, our loved ones happy, at the expense sometimes of other people, or, and so some of us do good deeds for others, but, a lot of the main focus is on ourselves for a very good reason too, for survival reasons as well. But in Buddhism, we try to have a much broader view, one that includes interdependence and interconnectedness. 2020 and even 2021 is a tremendous example of interconnectedness. And you have a virus that starts on one side of the world, and in a few months, the entire globe is affected by it. suffering from it and dealing with it. In the same token, it can be overcome only with, interconnectedness and people dealing with each other in positive ways. Interconnectedness, interdependence is a very important concept in Buddhism. So with that in mind, with that view in mind, we set our intentions to benefit not just ourselves through this practice, but to benefit all beings, right? The ripple effect. So as we transform or we transcend into negative behaviors and negative qualities, that has a ripple effect in our world. And like we've said before, a drop in the ocean becomes the ocean, right? So you're just setting these intentions in the broadest view possible. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to meditate to bring benefit to yourself, right? And many of us come to meditation for different reasons. Most come because they need something else, that they're suffering, they're having difficulties in life, they have a lot of stress or whatever, and we're using meditation as a tool to cope. That's all perfectly legitimate as well. I went into Buddhism for that reason. I went into Buddhism before I got into meditation. But people can go to meditation for the very same reason, kind of like as you go to a doctor when you have an illness. And we're using meditation, and if you're so inclined, the teachings of the Buddha, the Dharma, as ways of dealing with the difficulties of being, a human being on this planet 2021, right? I mean, walking barefoot in New York City every day is probably not a good idea. You're probably going to get injured and cut and maybe sick and whatever. And one solution would be to put a thick, deep pile carpet across the whole city, which would be nice, but it's pretty ridiculous. The other solution is to wear a set of good shoes. So that's what we're trying to do. So we have a way of interfacing and interacting with the world that allows us to not be overwhelmed by situations and by stress and by our reactions to situations, because it's not solely the external forces that are causing us to suffer. Equally, or perhaps more likely, it's our own projections about it and our own habitual tendencies to react in certain ways toward it. So with all that in mind, let's meditate. Let's start really with the basic practice. The first being the seat. I'm on a meditation square kind of thing and a cushion. Now, the cushion is good. It kind of helps to have your hips either even or above your knees. It's just more comfortable that way. Some people are more flexible. Their bodies are different. You could just sit on the floor with nothing and you're comfortable. Cross-legged is good. If you're more flexible, you could do this half lotus kind of thing. If you just want to do this, it's fine. It's important to be comfortable, though, and to find a comfortable position. The back should be straight, but not rigid. Nothing should be too rigid. It's really, you're trying to relax into this posture. There's no need to be intense with the body or with the mind, which we'll get to later, because we're basically just sitting doing nothing. It's not really that complicated in many ways. So the back straight, but not rigid, not erect, militaristic or whatever, but just relaxed. Shoulders relaxed. Hands, I like this. Back of the hand into the palm curved with the thumbs touching in the lap. You could also go on your knees. Doesn't really matter, whatever's comfortable. Head is tilted slightly downward. The mouth is relaxed. Now the teeth can be slightly open and the tongue resting, in the space between the front of your, the back of your front teeth, top teeth, and the roof of your mouth. Lips kind of closed, but not the jaw shouldn't be tense. The eyes in the tradition that that I work in, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the eyes are open meditation. Some people teach, there's many ways of teaching meditation. This we call calm abiding meditation. And in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we keep our eyes open, but we don't fixate intensely on whatever we're staring at, and we don't space out and unfocus our eyes. We just kind of rest lightly on whatever's in front of us. And that could be the view out a window, it could be a picture, it could be a flower, it could be a blank wall, whatever. But not to get fixated intensely and not to get spaced out. We also talk about taking this seat with dignity as an intention as well. The dignity of committing yourself to pursuing basic sanity, to quote Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. Now we go to the breath. So we breathe through the nose, unless you can't, for whatever reason, you're stuffed up or whatever, and then breathe through your mouth if you have to. But breathing through the nose. Not deep breaths, not shallow breaths, normal, relaxed breath. And start to become aware of the breath. Put your attention on the breath, especially on the place where your nostrils meet the top of your lip. So now you're in your posture, you're relaxed. Your eyes are open, but not fixated, not spaced out. You're breathing, and you're relaxed. And what's going to happen is you are going to think, because that's what the mind does. I had a misconception for many, many years, as do a lot of people. That meditation meant to not think, which is a complete misconception. And B, that I had such a busy mind that I couldn't meditate because my mind is all over the place. I find most people think that way, by the way. I'm not unique in that aspect. But the mind, by its nature, thinks. It is very busy. So what we do here, this is the whole crux of meditation. As we're focusing on the breath, we're going to start to think. The key is to become aware of the fact that you're thinking. Mind looking at mind. Mind becoming aware of what it's doing, of the movies and tapes that it's playing. I can think of this week, I'm moving, the movers are coming tomorrow, and that can set off a chain of thoughts, right? So what time are they coming, and when are we leaving the next day, and where we're gonna, are we gonna go to a hotel, are we gonna go to friends, the story of thought, the chain of thought that can take us. This has been going on our whole lives, really. We're interrupting that flow by becoming aware of the movement of thought, right? That's what we're doing. Really, that's all we're doing. So as we're in our posture and as we focus on our breath, we become aware. I'm aware of what I have to do later today. And when I become aware of it, I go back to the breath. That's it. I don't judge the thought. I don't say, I don't want to be thinking. I don't follow the thought and take it to its next step, which is what's happening the next day or what's happening later. I don't push it away. I don't indulge it. All I do is go back to the breath. I notice tomorrow morning, the movers are coming at 9, back to the breath. Settle again. And relax into that. They talk about the body being like a guitar string, not too tight, because then the note, you don't make a note, not too loose, because then you don't make a note on the string, but tuned like a guitar string, just enough tension that it can resonate and vibrate, right? That's how the body should be. That's kind of how the mind should be as well. We're not rigid thinking about waiting for the thought or going back to the breath. The thought comes in, what am I going to have for lunch today? Just touch it. which brings us to the visualization technique that we've been using. And there are probably many in meditation instruction. We use the image of the sky as the mind, the cloud as the thought, and the cloud could also be emotion. Emotion could also be a storm. But the mind as a sky, and sky meaning complete, unstained, clear, limitless, wide open, unlimited potentiality. Try to relate to the mind that way. And the thought is a cloud, right? So my thought of what I'm having for lunch tomorrow is a cloud that has arisen in the sky. The cloud comes from the sky. It doesn't come from anywhere else, right? It arises out of the sky and it will dissolve back into the sky. The fact that it arises into the sky it's not permanent by any means. And the fact that it arises does not mean it affects it permanently or stains it or damages it or anything. It will dissolve back into the sky from whence it came, from where it came, without leaving a trace, ultimately, right? Same with thought. Thoughts may reoccur, but they don't exist independently, they don't exist permanently. So we're sitting in our posture, we're focusing on breath, thinking about a rug that has to be rolled up lately and taped up for the mover. I recognize that I'm thinking about that and I go back to the breath. I imagine that thought like a cloud in the sky and that it just dissolves back into the sky. And I rest in that image, but really try to connect to that image as the mind, resting in that clear, pristine quality of mind. Clear, unstained sky. That is the practice. And today we're going to do very short sessions of meditation, like we did when we started. And let's do 5 minutes of that. Starting now. Excellent. That's basic calm body meditation practice. And when if you make that, somewhat regular on a regular basis, and many of you have since you've started this, or maybe before you have for a long time, you begin to be able to bring that kind of attention to your mind, not just on the cushion, but in daily life, and that can bring us more clarity in how we interact and interface with the world. If you have questions, there's a Q&A feature. You can ask questions. We'll try to answer some. Going back to the beginning of this class, I asked my teacher, Garchen Rinpoche, who's a Tibetan Buddhist Lama, I said, a lot of people I've met on Instagram want to learn meditation. Should I teach that? And he said, you don't have to ask me for permission. You just ask your own mind. If you have a mind to benefit beings, then that's good. And I'd like to think that my mind was set on benefiting beings. Part of it, I'm sure, is. Part of it probably is because I'm, human and a work in progress like all of us. My mind has pettiness and ego, self-centeredness, competitiveness. There's an element of maybe doing this kind of thing to aggrandize the sense of ego and credentials and things like that. Maybe, probably, most likely. But if some people can benefit from it, because ultimately people will maybe meditate or learn, I thought that was still worth it. So we started doing this, and I post a lot of stuff about Buddhism on Instagram, and people ask questions because they knew that. So then I went back and said, well, people want to know a little bit of Dharma, a little Buddhist teachings. And he said, really, that's okay. Make it more of like a discussion and really keep the focus on the mind. And he said, because Buddha is not the name of a man, it's really the name of mind. Big point. Now, Buddhism is not a theistic religion. Buddha was not a god. He's not worshipped as a god. He was a man who developed his mind of consciousness to the utmost potential. So my tradition looks at the mind. Say there's a running river, there's money, and you get a glass of it. And you walk with this glass and it's being agitated and it's a muddy glass of water, right? And you get on a bus and you go home and the bus is bumpy because you're in the country and the road is bumpy. And this glass is still, the water is still agitated in this muddy glass. And then you walk off the bus and you get home and you put the glass down on the table. And then the water settles. And what happens? The sediment, which creates the color, the mud, the color of the mud, settles to the bottom, leaving clear water. That's kind of the analogy that Buddhists look at the mind. And that clarity, which is the same clarity we talk about the sky, is really Buddha nature. That's already there. That's already within us, right? The sediment is the conditioning, the stains, the negative emotions, the clinging, the grasping, the competitiveness, the jealousy, the ignorance, the hatred, the anger, the lust, whatever it is that keeps us or prevents us from having that vast view. And Buddhism is very much in sync with physics in a way, because physicists will tell you that in reality, we are not separate, right? Ultimate reality or quantum physics and all these things. Not only are we not separate, we're not as we appear. We're not solid. We're not, we're made up of waves and particles that become waves and waves that become particles. And, so Buddhism really has a view of that vastness and offers a way for us as stained or whatever, defiled or, muddy glasses of water as human beings, offers us a way to connect with that innate clarity, which really is enlightenment, ultimately. And you can think of meditation as a practice to work on that settling of the sediment, because when you do rest in that nature of mind, when you recognize the thoughts and leave them in their place, there is that settling quality. And you'll notice every time you meditate, when you do go back to the breath and have those moments in between the thoughts, there is that clarity. And that will expand and build and increase as you habituate this practice. With that, I'm going to read a little bit from Rebel Buddha, which we've read from before, by Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche. Okay. The various methods of training the mind are the means we use to bring illumination, peace, and confidence to those states of mental darkness, agitation, and loss of heart that cause suffering. This training is divided into 3 areas: discipline, meditation, and higher knowledge. Once you can relate to the idea of training yourself, once you know what it is you're training and agree to be present as much as possible, then you can begin the actual training. Each kind of training helps you wake up and achieve individual freedom. When we talk about discipline, we're not talking about transforming a bad boy or girl into a good one. It doesn't mean beating your mind with a stick or whipping it into submission. And it's not a ploy to deprive yourself of excitement or interest. Like the word emotion, discipline in the Buddhist sense has several meanings that are not apparent in common English usage. First, it carries the meaning of cooling out. It's like being outside in the middle of a hot summer day, and just when you're feeling really beaten down by the heat, you find some relief in the shade. It's an example of the result of practicing discipline is relief from the intense distress we can feel from getting caught up in our ordinary, habitual patterns. Discipline also carries the meaning of taking your own seat, standing on your own feet. That means you don't always need guidance from someone else like you did when you were a kid. When you were young, you had plenty of authority figures. Your parents, teachers, and counselors taught you what to do. You learned the rules. But once you've gone through that, you realize you're capable of becoming your own guide, which is a liberating realization. In the same way, on the spiritual path, we reach a point where we're capable of evaluating our own actions and correcting our own mistakes. From one point of view, practicing discipline means following a path of ethical conduct. Certain actions are to be avoided and others are encouraged. We spoke about the teachings of the Buddha being actually very simple. One, do no harm. Two, cultivate virtue, or good qualities like patience and compassion and humility and generosity and all those things. And three, tame the mind. Those are the three real, although the Buddha taught for 50 years and they say the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha, in essence, those are the three pith instructions of the Buddha, if you will. The primary intention of this training is to become aware of our actions, see them clearly, be able to recognize those that are harmful, those that are beneficial, to be mindful of all our actions, and take care not to cause harm to others or to ourselves is the mark of a disciplined mind. That means we have to examine our assumptions about what constitutes a positive or negative action. Some actions can be positive in one social context, but negative in another. Discipline goes beyond just a set of rules. It requires genuine discrimination, empathy, and honesty. Becoming a disciplined person means cultivating mindfulness and awareness so you can see your actions clearly and precisely. That's what we're working on. Okay, let's take a couple of questions and we're going to sit again in a minute. Surely trying to eliminate all of your ego and self-centeredness is impossible. No, I don't think it's impossible. I think it's really difficult and takes a lot of work, but I think that's what the Buddha did, and that's why that's what is meant by enlightenment. And it is, if it wasn't possible, there wouldn't be Buddhism. So it is possible. It's a tall order. You may not achieve it in this lifetime. You may not achieve it, you may achieve it in small degrees and little pieces as time goes by, but I 100% believe it is definitely possible. Again, answering these questions, I'm trying to answer these questions only to the point where I have been instructed in the Dharma by my teacher or teachers that I've read or had teachings with. It's not my interpretation or my opinion. And if I can't answer this question in terms of an accurate interpretation of the Dharma, I won't, and I don't, as you know. I find Buddhism in our modern world sometimes it's not so intimidating as other religions. I don't even consider religion per se. It's more of a science of the mind to me, really, than anything else. But sometimes it falls into this very new agey, touchy-feely, hippy-dippy, thing about love and compassion. And those are all part of it, but the actual teachings are very precise and I think should be learned and applied in a very precise way. And the best way to do that is to go to the source. Go to teachers who are connected to authentic lineages of Buddhism. Not someone who just read a lot of books and now is, coming up with his own interpretation or spin. Go to the source. I post lots of authentic lineage lamas in Tibetan Buddhism on Instagram, on my stories. Some are alive, some are not. Do some research. Go on YouTube. There's tons of teachings of great lamas like Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. But go to the source. I'm not a fan of this Buddhism as you like it. what works and what doesn't work. I like going to the source and being very precise and very accurate in terms of what these teachings are saying. So just, I think I just want to say that. I have been practicing mindfulness meditation for a good few months now, and was wondering what you think about doing meditation that involves a lot of visualization, like mindfulness meditation. Well, I mean, the visualization we're dealing with is that kind of image of the sky and the cloud, which is very simple. It may help you, may not. There are a lot of visualization practices in certain schools of Buddhism, but that has to be given to you by your teacher, I think, at least, to be most effective. But the very basic visualization thing, we're just using that as an image. Sometimes it just helps us wrap our minds around these concepts and these practices and techniques to have some kind of mental image of how it works. Over the last year, the thought of death has been more and more prevalent in our minds. How do you meditate on it without fear? Well, it's not easy to have no fear in the face of death. Not at all. It's not. But death is inevitable and is a reality. We are impermanent. We know that. The Buddha died in his 80s, and they said that his death was one of the most important teachings to his followers, because it was a teaching on impermanence, which is reality. The Buddhists also believe in reincarnation. So that's a whole other discussion, which I don't think there's time to get into on what that is per se. So they have a very different outlook on death. They kind of see it like changing clothes in some respect. I'm talking about the masters who have really realized these teachings. There's one thing about understanding a teaching. Oh, that makes sense, right? Get rid of the ego and all those kinds. Yeah, that makes sense. Another thing, just because you understand it does not mean you now have embodied that and can live out of that. A master can. Someone who's dedicated their lives to these practices can, you can teach a high school student, you can explain how neurosurgery works and getting rid of a brain tumor, and really explain the mechanisms and the anatomy and the technique and all that. And they may have a very good understanding of how that works. I certainly wouldn't want them taking out anything in my brain. I want someone who's dedicated their, most of their adult life to that and has done it many, 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 many times. So, with that in mind, I think the teachings of Buddhism can certainly help us with overcoming that fear. I don't say that from someone who's overcome that fear. I have not at all. But, it's not something that's going to happen from reading a book, I doubt. It's going to happen from, lots of practice and kind of changing our habits, changing how we look at our mind and how we respond out of our mind. There's no quick fix. It really isn't. Does Buddhism always portray ego as a negative thing? It can certainly be positive in some circumstances. Yeah, I mean, do you mean positive in terms of like jumping out of the way of a speeding bus? Yeah. Is it your ego that's protecting you? Your self-preservation? It's not so much about sacrificing yourself or diminishing yourself or something like that, as it is of creating a wider view of others, and not just your existence be about a survival instinct, There's this teacher, Zonsar Khyentse Rinpoche, who was involved in the movie Little Buddha, directed by Bernardo Bertolucci. And I think Zanza Kensei was an advisor. Maybe he was even in the movie as like an extra or something like that. And Bertolucci said to him, uh, I'm Italian. I have passion. Passion's very important to me. You always talk about, the Buddhists talk about kind of, the emotions and getting rid of them and transcending them and all those things. But how can I get rid of that? It's part and parcel of who I am. And Zarsa Kensei Rinpoche said something very interesting to him. He said, you can keep your passion. You just have to get rid of yourself. So he's not saying that being passionate about one's art or one's life in a way, is wrong or bad. It's attaching that to the self or using that to adorn the self, right? To aggrandize a sense of self, inflating your standing towards, others, elevating yourself and your standing. As opposed to other people, using it as this competitive edge or something like that. There's nothing wrong with that, there's nothing wrong with being who we are, right? But ego can completely debilitate one. Just say, you can just say, well, I know everything. I've gotten to, especially if you're somebody who's successful or rich or has done pretty well, you could say, well, look, I've done better than everyone in my high school class. So I must know something. And maybe you do. But why are you here? Why are you learning to meditate, or why are you interested in Buddhism? Because obviously there's something more, or something that you feel still needs to be worked on or transcended or something like that. What differences do you see between Hinduism and Buddhism? I don't know much about Hinduism at all, I'll be honest. Although Buddha, when he lived in 2500, Hinduism was the, I think, predominant religion then, where he was living in northern India. So a lot of, I think, Buddhist ideas kind of came from the prevailing thought and prevailing ideas that were around at the time. Do you feel you can balance a very comedic mind career with being a dedicated Buddhist? Is it hypocritical for a comedian, scriptwriter to pen risque, fun-pointing material for laughs while wanting to cultivate positivity toward other beings? Sure. Why not? I don't see why that. I think that's a really kind of if you're giving people a moment of diversion and fun in a very difficult world, that's actually a very beneficial thing, positive thing, generous thing, an act of generosity. Why not? It's similar to what we just said about Bertolucci. It's like you keep your passion, but get rid of yourself. Meaning, don't make it all about you. All right. I could have said, like when we were saying before, I don't like using myself as an example so much, but it was like, you know what? I probably shouldn't do this class because I'm still caught up in my ego. On Instagram, we're all like masters of domains. You know what I mean? You have your followers, and some people have a lot of followers. Some people have 100,000 followers. Some have 1,000. And we all think we're so in the center of this little world now, especially, So one could say, you know what, it's not good for my practice to do this class because it's going to inflate my ego. And then, people, maybe some of you who've never meditated before wouldn't have been doing this. So trying to go beyond just the me, you know what I mean? How has Buddhism impacted your work? I don't like to say this so much, but I do think meditation really can improve your concentration and focus. I do see a correlation with that, which is good for any kind of work. acting or writing, what I do, or but whatever it is you do, you're a chef or something like that. I think it does improve your sense of concentration, but I think it's given me, rather than just my work, the work environment, it's improved my way of interacting, being part of a team, being part of an experience, and being able to enjoy it a little more, because of some of the teachings and how I've tried to have them affect my view and how I see things. You know, it's a little bit more liberating. Um, I could go to, yet very small things like being a parent, can push buttons like that. I can go to work and be like, the Buddha and be nice and friendly. And then you come home and your teenage son does something and you just, fly off the handle. But I'm not saying that that's, you know what I mean? We're all human, we're works in progress. We're students. We are students. Keep that in mind. But I think it's allowed me to enjoy what I do more and have a little bit more confidence and be a little bit less neurotic, I think, and make these experiences a little bit more. When you really start to meditate on impermanence, and I'll say one thing I've noticed is that, and I get caught up in problems all the time. When January 6th happened, I was like frozen in anger and rage. And I wish I could have applied all my practices and gotten out of that for 2 days. And I did not. I admit I did not. I was choked by it. Anger and fear and frustration and I was caught up in all those things, and it didn't help watching it over and over again on television. And then slowly I came out of it and had started to get some perspective on it. But in general, things that are not so heightened, that's a pretty extreme situation, right? I think practicing Buddhism has added a little bit of space, allow you to put a little air in situations, in interactions. And when things arise and problems arise, just having a little perspective, knowing that this is temporary. So much, I feel in my life, it's always been like you're in a problem and it's like it colors everything and you don't see any way out of it. And knowing that things are impermanent, like the thoughts, like those clouds, like we were doing in meditation. So hopefully that makes sense a little bit. How can someone develop equanimity? Are there any books or exercises for this? I mean, equanimity is a very broad concept, I mean, it's part of having that wide view. The practice of Tonglen, which I'm hoping to have a very skilled, learned Lama teach us in the near future, can help with that. And there's a good book by Pema Chodron about Tonglen that I would recommend. But the practice of Buddhism can help develop equanimity in a general sense. Can I meditate in the dark? Can I listen to some music? If I can, what kind of music? You absolutely can meditate in the dark. Actually, some Buddhists go into dark retreat. They could go into a small retreat hut that's completely dark for months and sometimes years. You can meditate in the dark. I think if you're a beginner, which a lot of us are, I think at this stage, it's a little better to do it in the light, because part of what we're doing, why our eyes are open, right, is to be able to have this mindful awareness and bring it into our daily life. Can you listen to music? The problem with listening to music is you can get caught up in the story of the music. You may have a relationship to the music. You may have memories connected to the music. You may be a musician and are listening to the subtle or finer points of the music. You may, get distracted. I said, oh, that guitar lick is great. I mean, what's his name? That's Jimmy Page. That's fantastic. I remember I saw Led Zeppelin in 1970, so I would say for this type of meditation, I'm sure there are meditation techniques that implement music. For this calm abiding, I would say probably not the best thing. With that in mind, let's sit for another 5 minutes. I mean, we're doing this is a good back to basics class. I mean, it's all been basics really, but I think it's always good to recalibrate, go back to the foundational techniques. Buddhism has lots of, like I said, 84,000 teachings of the Buddha, and some are very advanced practices. But those three things that we said, do no harm, cultivate virtue, cultivate good, do good, basically. 3, tame the mind. Those three things, no matter how far you go in the teachings, those will always be the foundation and will always be part of your practice. This kind of meditation can always be part of your Buddhist practice. So it's good to just always keep going back to the foundation of it, the technique. Let's do another 5 minutes. That's it. Usually we sit for longer in this class, like twice as long, but I think it's good to recalibrate every so often. Now that we're 6 months in, go back to the building blocks. I found it very hard in the beginning to make meditation a regular practice in my life. I never thought I would do it. I resisted it, but if you can, it's really when you get the benefit of it, without making it somewhat regular. I'm saying you every single day. You try, but some days you won't. But know that it should be a regular part of your daily life, and implementing it, even in the beginning, in very small ways, even if it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes. It helps to have a nice place set up for you where you do it the same place every day. It helps to have around the same time every day. Whatever you can do to make it regular, but really to get the benefit of this practice, it has to be done regularly. Anything that inspires you, a picture or something that you sit in front and it's a corner of the house that just so your mind knows that that place and that time is set aside for that, and that'll help you. It's not easy. Start small steps. We could do a couple more questions. How did you engage your children, teenagers to practice meditation? That my teenagers don't, actually. They've been exposed to Buddhism. My youngest was into it when he was little. He used to come with us to the teachings. We've hosted lamas and teachers in our home. They've met some lamas, teachers, but they are not Buddhist. But I have a feeling as they get older, they will, because I think it's something, when you're young, you don't want to do what your parents are doing, but at some point they may realize they want that, and they hopefully will know where to go. Do you think that praying is a form of meditation? Probably. But it's not what we're doing. It's not calm abiding meditation. It's kind of the prayer. You're fixating the mind and connecting to whatever. If it's an aspiration prayer, like we do in the beginning, or a dedication prayer, like we do at the end. But yeah, I guess so, because it's about focusing the mind on something. Do you include chanting? Do you find it to be a meditative experience? Some teachers will, in Tibetan Buddhism, which is the tradition I follow. I don't know that so much about other traditions. Sometimes you will be given mantra, and there's mantra recitation, um, but that's really has to be given by a teacher. I don't know that that's something you just do. I mean, maybe. I mean, if you watch, say, the Dalai Lama, and he says chanting Om Mani Padme Hum, which he does sometimes. If he says that that's a good idea and you should do it, then maybe you should. But I think it's something that maybe if a teacher offers that as an instruction, to take it. When we say all beings, I find it easy to grasp this from a view of how all beings are of the same mind, and it makes it feel less broad. Then I feel more connected to all that way. What are your thoughts? I think that's very good. You know, if you can connect that way, that's great. Okay, well, let's do one more question. This is my first meditation class. I found my way because I'm looking to improve my mental health. 3 months ago, I had my 4-year relationship come to an end. This led to major anxiety and depression and a racing mind that seemingly never stopped. In that time, I've done consistent therapy, started antidepressants, practiced yoga, and made some major life changes. However, I still find myself struggling with my unwanted thoughts and extreme negative projections of my ex and my future life. I'm wondering if you have any advice how I could use meditation to help myself overcome these mental health issues. Well, you do say I have done consistent therapy and started antidepressants, which, therapy and professional, you don't say if you're still doing it or not, but, you know, um, I hope you're still doing therapy because it's very important dealing with anxiety and this kind of depression. And if you need, pharmaceutical help for that, that's good. If that's what you need and you've been diagnosed as that. Um, Sometimes the therapist we have is not the right fit. If you're here, I'm assuming you're interested in meditation. Obviously, you may be interested in Buddhism. There are a lot of therapists that are Buddhists. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who was one of the first Tibetan Buddhist lamas in America, really planted the flag of Tibetan Buddhadharma, at least in the United States. A lot of his students came out of the hippie movement in the early 70s, and a lot of them became therapists. A lot of them went, they were educated, college, a lot of college educated people who went, took this interest in Buddhism and meditation and went back and learned therapy and became therapists. So there's a lot of that. And I mean, you can do your research and find people who teach from a Buddhist perspective. That may help you. Maybe you need a different therapist if you feel it's not working. Is the therapy helping? I'm not sure. Meditation could certainly help these things, but I'm only going to answer from a completely personal point of view. Buddha meditation alone probably would not be enough for me personally. Uh, like I said, I went to Buddhism first and then practiced meditation. I find the teachings, not just the meditation, but the teachings, the Dharma, uh, implementing those into your life and trying to use those as a point of view to be really helpful. So if you are inspired that way, I would say follow that path if you're inspired to. And if you're not, really address whether this therapy that you're involved is working, I would say. I'm just talking out of common sense, you know what I mean? Because if you're still suffering. But if you do feel you're making the correct, enough progress, then stay with it, Okay. I think we are. This is interesting. I'm very moved by this practice. As a new therapist, this is Wanda. I think there's a beautiful link between practice and the benefits of long-term mental health maintenance. I am so grateful for this path. Do you recommend that I begin practice with a teacher? I am in Las Vegas and would love to learn more about your journey. Yes, I do recommend you begin this practice with a teacher if you're inspired to. 100%. That takes searching and research to find the right teacher. But luckily, a lot of these teachers are available online. There's Zoom webinars. There's initiation, and I'm not going to go into what those mean, but there's or refuge vows, which is the vows you take to officially become a Buddhist. You could do that virtually now, which, through the wonder of technology, you can attend live teachings with great lamas and receive the same benefit and connection you would make with them in person, and you could do it through their kindness. They're doing it through webinars. So if you're inspired to, yes. If you're not inspired to, no. If you're just inspired to meditate in a secular fashion, that's great. I think it's really great, you know. Okay, let's dedicate the merit, as we did the setting our intentions. This is a prayer of dedication of merit. So whatever merit we gain from practice of Dharma or meditation is not just for ourselves, but connecting to that vast view that we talked about. We like to, like I said, a drop in the ocean becomes an ocean. So we're creating a bit of merit for ourselves. We offer that to the benefit of all beings to establish that wider view. Because at some point, if all beings were enlightened, right, there would be no, violence and hatred and aggression, all those kind of things. So it's a big aspiration, right? But setting that large view, I think, helps the allows our smaller personal, interpersonal, daily reactions, uh, allows us to have a better perspective on how to deal with them by kind of adopting that view somehow into our consciousness. Dedication of merit. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, and samsara by which means worldly existence. Basically. See you next week. Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for being here for 6 months. I figured I'd only do this maybe for a couple of weeks, but now you forced me to have to show up every Monday, which is a good thing for me. It gives me discipline. I might not do it or sit on a Monday at 9 o'clock if it weren't for you. So part of it is you guys contributing that way to my own discipline, and I thank you for it. I'm grateful for it. See you.